Welcome to night number 32 of History Bedtime Stories in bed in our pajamas. Tonight we're talking about Clara Ward. And Clara Ward's story is a little bit risque. So if you've got kids, you may want to listen to this and then decide if you want them to listen to this. And when I say risque, I mean risque by the standards of the 1890s Edwardian era. So you might be like, this is totally cool, but thought I'd warn you. So Clara Ward is born on June 17th, 1873 here in the city of Detroit. And she is the daughter of Michigan's first millionaire, Captain Eber Brock Ward. And Captain Ward is wealthy beyond measure. He's worth $1 million in the 1870s, the equivalent today of over $150 million. He made his money in steamships, lumber, mining and quarries. He was huge in the Upper Peninsula's iron and steel. He also was a manufacturer, and he was the president of a railroad. He dies before Clara, his daughter, is 2. Now, she is the product of his second marriage, and Catherine Lyon, her mother, and then her brother, Thomas Lyon, take over running the company. But from the age of 2, she has a $50,000 a year income. $50,000 a year income. That is the equivalent today of about $1.1 million a year just for being Clara Ward. And from the time she's very young, she is beautiful. She is talented musically, and she is a giant pain in the butt to her mother. She doesn't wait to be debuted. She sneaks off into parties. She seems to always have a boyfriend. She is just really ruining every social moray of the age. And it gets so bad that her mom is like, we got to do something with this kid. So she sends her off to finishing schools in Europe. First England, then France. She gets kicked out of both. Her mother is distraught. I mean, her mother is going like, what are we ever going to do with this kid? So she sends her to a school run by Catholic nuns. Clara makes it about 9 weeks before she so scandalizes the nuns that they're like, you gotta get rid of this devil child. She cannot be here. She's causing problems in the school and the convent. So now Catherine Lyons is thinking, I've got to do something. I've got to marry this girl before her reputation gets so bad that nobody will want her. And I know in our 2020 brains, we're like, who cares? We don't need to get married. We don't need any of this. Screw you and your reputation, and screw this idea that we have to behave in a certain way. But in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, really until very, very recently, not only were women expected to marry, but they were expected to marry within their social class. So Clara Ward has that going for her. She is what comes to be known as the American princesses, women who have huge dowries. Now, at the time that these wealthy American heiresses were looking to get married, every door in America is slammed in their face because socially, their parents are up-and-comers. They're new money. They're nouveau riche. No one in high American society, sort of that East Coast Knickerbocker established families, want to marry off their sons to American heiresses with this sort of bad reputation. Don't mind the cat. So they go to Europe, and they start really realizing that their reputation is not as big of a problem, because the great dynasties of Europe, these great noble families, are broke, absolutely penniless. They've got these giant stately homes that are falling to pieces for lack of funds to repair them. They're still living these elaborate lifestyles, and the creditors are banging at the door. So we get into cash for class. American heiresses marrying into poor, noble European families. They take a huge dowry, which props up that family and keeps them going. And in exchange, they get a title, they get a bit of prestige, and they really get a societal place in the world. So Clara Ward's mother, Catherine, decides she is going to marry the Prince of Belgium, who has already been kind of saying like, ooh, I'm sort of interested in her. He is 31 years old to her 16 years. But on May 20th, 1890, Clara Ward becomes Princess of Belgium, styled Princess de Chaman-Chamy. She marries this guy, and it's really raved about in all of the papers. Everyone thinks, oh, an American princess. She is actually called Princess, and this is a huge deal. She goes on to have 2 children, which for a woman marrying into a dynastic family, that's a huge deal. She secures the line, secures the dynasty. But then one night she is with her husband. They are eating in this very kind of schwanky restaurant in Paris. And although the marriage is unhappy, no one expects her to fall madly in love with the Hungarian gypsy violinist who comes over to her and the prince's table, plays his little song, and she's like, oh, this is my guy. She falls madly in love with him. His name is Reggio Janis, and he is the reason she runs off. She leaves her husband, she abandons her 2 children, and she runs off with him to Egypt. While there, she teaches him to read and write. He was formerly illiterate. She really falls madly in love with him, and they're burning through a lot of money. And at the same time, you have the prince, her husband, going like, excuse me, hold on, point of order. I'm supposed to be getting that money. I married her. That money is under my control now. It ends up going to the courts, and although she gets a divorce, which was pretty rare at the time, the prince gets the kids and a lot of the money. And now she needs a plan for how to make some of that income to keep living the way her and new second husband, Rogerio, have been kind of accustomed to. So she decides to go on the stage. The Moulin Rouge. In Paris, she starts doing what she calls pose plastique. She wears a form-fitting, skin-colored bodysuit. This is as close to naked as you can get without being naked, and she poses sort of like dramatically on the stage with props and everything. The curtains open. There she is in her pose. She holds that pose for about 3 minutes while people stare in amazement at a European princess, an American heiress, almost nude, up on stage live for their entertainment. Then the curtains close and she changes into new accessories and poses again. This is so scandalous. It's in every paper in America and Europe. She is a fallen woman and people can't get enough. She actually starts making over $100,000 a year selling postcards with images of her dressed in this body stocking posing. She actually is quite smart. She gets a deal with the postcard company. They get 80% of the profits. She gets 20% of the profits, but they spend all of the money to sort of set this up and take the images. Eventually, her love for Rogerio sort of fades and she leaves him. She runs off, sort of in the midst of all of this. There's actually a cake that the recipe forms in Europe and spreads through Belgium, France, and England. It's named for her affair and then eventually leaving Rogerio, and it's this chocolate sponge sinful cake that starts finding its way onto European menus. That's how known this story was at the time. Her second husband is a guy she actually meets on a train. He's the waiter in the dining car. His name is Pepino Ricardio, and he is a Spaniard. She marries him in 1904, leaves him in 1906, and her fourth marriage is to an Italian named Signor Castaglio, and he is the train manager of a small Italian train station. They are married for about 18 months, but at age 43, Clara Ward, the Princess of Belgium, 4-time married star of the stage, dies. She dies in 1916 in Italy. Her obituary runs in papers throughout the world, including here in Detroit, in the Detroit News. Clara Ward is remembered as being a wild child of Detroit, a true woman of the stage, a woman of many love affairs, and one of my favorite wild women of Detroit. If you've been liking these videos, do us a favor and give us a share down below and tag a few friends. If you do, we'll select a winner to win a whole big pile of Detroit stickers later on next week. All you gotta do is tag a friend and give us a share. Wash your hands. We'll see you tomorrow night.